Murder among us. Hey, do you want to know a scary thought? You know how we talk about serial killers like they're monsters from another world? Like they're somehow separate from the rest of us? Well, here's the uncomfortable truth. Before they were ever caught, before they were locked away or executed, they were just living in public, walking past people at grocery stores, standing in line, holding jobs, smiling, blending in. They weren't hiding in the shadows. They were right there, mixed in with everyone else. And that's what makes this so unsettling. Not too long ago, I covered the topic of serial killers who were never caught. Some of those cases were recent, others were much older cold cases that slowly faded from public memory. If you haven't seen that video yet, it's linked in the description, and I highly recommend watching it after this one. But today, I want to go a step further, because this video isn't about killers from decades ago who may or may not still be alive. This is about individuals who are believed to be currently active, killers who were never identified, never arrested, never stopped. That means they are very much alive, very much free, and very much capable of still killing people today. That's a chilling thought. These cases are disturbing, frustrating, and in some situations, deeply suspicious. And as we go through them, you're going to notice a pattern. Vulnerable victims, unanswered questions, and investigations that never reached a conclusion. So buckle up, because we're starting with one of the most unsettling, unsolved cases in modern American history, the Jeff Davis 8 killer. We're starting this list with an individual known as the Jeff Davis 8 killer. And this case is unsettling for more reasons than one. In the mid to late 2000s, Jefferson Davis Parish in Louisiana was suddenly thrust into the national spotlight after a string of unsolved murders began to surface. Over a span of just 4 years, 8 women were killed. Their bodies were dumped in swamps and canals around the small city of Jennings. These victims would later become known collectively as the Jefferson Davis 8. What makes this case especially disturbing isn't just the number of victims, it's how closely connected they all were. All 8 women knew each other, some of them quite well. In fact, 2 of the victims were cousins. This wasn't random, this wasn't coincidence. The connections between the victims were so strong that investigators immediately knew something was deeply wrong. As more information came to light, another chilling detail emerged. At various points in their lives, several of the victims had worked as police informants. Some of them had even reported on each other. This single fact would change how families and the public viewed the entire investigation. Almost immediately, suspicion began to shift. Families of the victims started to believe that law enforcement may have been involved, or at the very least, knew far more than they were letting on. That theory was later explored in depth in the 2016 book Murder in the Bayou, which only added fuel to an already growing fire of distrust. Despite national attention, despite public pressure, and despite years passing, the case went nowhere. There were no arrests, no solid suspects, no definitive leads. As of right now, there is no confirmed identity of who killed these 8 women, or whether it was a single killer or multiple people working together. And that's the most terrifying part. Given how recent these murders were, the chances that the person, or people, responsible are still alive and still free is extremely high. So what do you think? Was this simply a rural town with limited funding, overwhelmed by a complex series of murders? Or did local police want their string of informants gone, explaining why they all disappeared, why evidence was scarce, and why it took so long for these murders to even be officially connected? Whatever the truth is, one thing is certain: justice has not been served, and whoever did this was never stopped. The I-70 killer. Moving on. Let's talk about another case that proves just how easy it once was to disappear after committing murder. This is the story of the I-70 killer. If you're unfamiliar, Interstate 70 is one of the longest highways in the entire United States. It stretches across multiple states, running from Utah all the way to Maryland. literally from one side of the country to the other. It's massive. And in 1992, that highway became the perfect hunting ground. That year, a dangerous individual began targeting people along I-70. The confirmed cases attributed to this killer include the deaths of 6 people, most of whom worked alone in convenience stores located near the highway. The majority of the victims were young women with brunette hair. There was only one exception: a male clerk who was killed simply because he happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because the crimes were spread across such a wide geographic area, police were immediately at a disadvantage. Different cities, different counties, different states, jurisdictional boundaries slowed everything down, and connecting the dots became nearly impossible. Investigators from each area did attempt to work together. Information was shared, notes were compared, patterns were discussed. But none of it was enough. There was no physical evidence that could definitively tie the murders together in a way that would point to a suspect. The most progress law enforcement ever made was producing 2 composite sketches of what the killer might have looked like. Those sketches went nowhere. No arrests were made. No suspects were charged. And no one was ever brought to justice. What's especially unsettling about this case is the timeline. These murders didn't happen in the 1960s or 70s. They happened in 1992, barely 30 years ago. That's not ancient history. The composite sketches suggested the killer was a young man, likely in his 20s or 30s at the time, which means there's a very real possibility that this person is still alive today. And if someone was capable of committing 6 murders and getting away with it that easily, it raises a chilling question. Did they ever really stop? A quick pause for your safety. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself something pretty obvious. How do you protect yourself from killers like this? From people who blend into society, leave almost no trace, and vanish before anyone even realizes what's happening? And honestly, I don't have an answer to that. But what I can tell you how to protect yourself from is cybersecurity threats, which is why this video is sponsored by NordVPN. If you're anything like me, you probably had way too much unsupervised internet access as a kid. And if you had that, there's a good chance you ended up on Omegle at some point. If you've ever been on Omegle, you might remember someone telling you exactly where you lived, what your name was, or other terrifyingly accurate details about your life. That wasn't magic. They were simply scanning your IP address and pulling whatever information was available. With a VPN, your information becomes completely anonymous, protecting you from that exact kind of attack, and much more. Think of Nord as a superhero for your online privacy. NordVPN protects you from man-in-the-middle attacks, phishing scams, password attacks, DDoS attacks, malware, malvertising, and even ransomware. Whenever you connect to a network, whether it's public or private, your information is vulnerable. A VPN keeps that information hidden by masking your real location and routing your data through secure servers. And there's another bonus. Not only are you protecting your privacy, but you can also unlock geo-restricted content by choosing your virtual location anywhere in the world. When you go online, there's far more happening behind the scenes than most people realize. And unfortunately, not everyone has your best interests in mind, especially when it comes to your personal data. If you're interested in taking your cybersecurity seriously, I highly recommend checking out NordVPN. Use my link, nordvpn.com/trustmebro, to get a 2-year plan with 4 extra months completely free. It's also risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to business. The Long Island serial killer. Next up is a case that shocked the entire country. Not just because of how many victims were involved, but because of how it was discovered. In May of 2010, a 24-year-old woman named Shannan Gilbert disappeared on Long Island, New York. Police began searching for her along Ocean Parkway, assuming it would be a relatively straightforward missing persons case. What they found instead changed everything. While Shannan Gilbert's body was not immediately located, investigators stumbled upon something far more disturbing: the remains of 4 other missing women. None of them were connected to Shannon's disappearance at first, but their discovery raised serious alarms. What began as a routine search quickly turned into one of the most extensive serial killer investigations in modern American history. Over the course of the following months, police expanded their search along the same stretch of roadway. As they did, they uncovered 6 more sets of remains, bringing the total number of victims to 10. Patterns soon began to emerge. Most of the victims were sex workers who had advertised their services on Craigslist. The similarities were too strong to ignore. Investigators were now confident that they were dealing with a serial killer, one who had been operating undetected for years. This case became known as the Long Island Serial Killer Investigation. Unlike many other cases on this list, police did identify persons of interest. There were suspects, there were theories, there was intense media coverage and enormous public pressure to solve the case. And yet, despite all of that, there were no arrests, no one was charged, no one was convicted, and the killer was never identified. To this day, the Long Island serial killer remains at large. There is no confirmation that they ever stopped. And given the amount of time that passed between victims, it's entirely possible that this person simply changed their methods or moved somewhere else. What makes this case especially disturbing is that it happened in a time of advanced technology. This wasn't decades ago. This was 2010, an era of DNA databases, digital records, and widespread surveillance. And still, the killer slipped away, which raises a terrifying possibility. If someone could get away with this then, what makes us think they couldn't still be out there now? Different places, same ending. Let's step outside of the United States for a moment, because this next case proves that you don't need physical proximity to create fear on a massive scale. We're going to Japan, specifically Hiroshima, and this one is both strange and terrifying in a very different way. Japan has a well-known obsession with vending machines. They're everywhere. In fact, on average, there is one vending machine for every 23 people. They're trusted, convenient, normal. But between April and November of 1985, that trust was weaponized. During that short period, 12 people were killed and 35 others were injured due to paraquat poisoning. Paraquat is a powerful herbicide, essentially a weed killer, and ingesting it is often fatal. As authorities investigated, they noticed a disturbing pattern. All of the victims had consumed a drink called Oranomin C. At the time, the company was running a promotion where customers would receive a free bottle after making a purchase from a vending machine. In Japanese culture, if someone didn't want the free drink, they would often leave it on top of the machine for someone else to take. Someone took advantage of that. The free drinks left on top of vending machines had been tampered with and poisoned. By the time police realized what was happening, it was almost impossible to trace. Too many fingerprints. Too many hands. And in 1985, there was very little CCTV footage available. No suspect was ever identified, and the person responsible was never found. Now, unfortunately, we can't stay out of the U.S. for long. In November of 2006, 4 bodies were discovered in a drainage ditch near Atlantic City, New Jersey. All 4 victims were women who worked as sex workers in the area. Their bodies were found lined up, and each had been strangled. Strangely, all of the bodies were positioned facing eastbound. That detail led investigators to name the unidentified killer the Eastbound Strangler. Despite advances in forensic technology and the recovery of DNA evidence, police were unable to match it to anyone. A $25,000 reward was offered, and still, nothing. The killer was never caught. And for good measure, let's add one more strangler to the list. Between 2001 and 2018, at least 50 women were murdered on the south and west sides of Chicago. Many of the victims shared similar characteristics: African-American women, often sex workers, killed by strangulation. Because so many of these cases remain unsolved, investigators began referring to the unknown perpetrator, or perpetrators, as the Chicago Strangler. While some individual cases have been solved, the majority have not. In 2019, a task force was formed to reinvestigate these deaths. Somewhat disturbingly, authorities stated that they could not confirm whether these murders were committed by one person or multiple individuals. But with this many similarities, it's hard to believe it was all coincidence. Different countries, different years, different methods, but the same outcome: no justice. The Danilovsky Maniac and Final Thoughts. For the final entry on this list, we're leaving the United States and heading to Russia, where one of the most disturbing unsolved cases remains unresolved to this day. This killer is known as the Danilovsky Maniac, also referred to as the Maniac with Dull Eyes. The nickname comes from a vague but haunting description given to police by witnesses who encountered him. Between 2004 and 2007, this individual is believed to have murdered at least 7 women. Some investigators suspect his activity may have started as early as 1999 and possibly continued until 2010. Like many of the killers discussed in this video, he targeted young women. He assaulted them, murdered them, and then concealed their bodies in construction sites around Togliatti, Russia, places where human remains could easily go unnoticed for long periods of time. But what truly sets this case apart is how the killer interacted with police. At several crime scenes, the Danilovsky Maniac left behind crude drawings, deliberate taunts meant to mock investigators and show that he wasn't afraid. Even with these provocations, and despite over 200 people being interrogated and a reward exceeding 500,000 rubles, his identity was never discovered. No arrest was ever made, and based on the timeline, there is a very real possibility that this person is still alive today. Before ending this video, there's one extremely important thing that needs to be said. Every victim mentioned here was a real person. These were real lives lost in horrific ways. These stories are disturbing not because they're entertaining, but because they're unresolved. And the most unsettling part of all, some of the people responsible may still be out there. Let me know what you think about these cases. If you haven't already, check out some of my other videos covering unsolved serial killers. And thank you again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, that's all for now. Trust me.